The world seemed to pause as King Charles and Prince William, two figures bearing the quiet gravity of duty, finally addressed the public. Yet this was no formal announcement or ceremonial message, but a rare moment of emotional transparency, hinting at the fragile reality surrounding Princess Catherine, a reality long shielded from view by layers of tradition and restraint. For months, questions lingered about what truly unfolded beyond the guarded walls of Kensington Palace, where silence spoke louder than any official statement. Why did William appear to defy every unspoken rule, choosing words that felt less like tradition and more like open confrontation with the very system that shaped him? Today, we draw back the veil to trace the unsettling sequence surrounding Catherine's gradual withdrawal from public view and the fractures that quietly formed within the palace itself. This is not merely a narrative about physical well-being, but a deeper reflection on influence, inner tension, and how Catherine's composed resolve subtly altered the direction of an ancient institution. Stay with us until the end. Subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments as we explore a chapter of royal history rarely brought into the light. Some aligned with Charles, convinced that openness would foster trust, while others feared the repercussions of stepping beyond long-standing customs. Still, one truth was impossible to ignore. The tone within the palace was no longer the same. In the days that followed, an unforeseen shift took place. William, who had carried quiet differences with his father for years, began to see him through a new lens. Bound by shared worry and mutual care, the emotional space between father and son gradually softened, allowing understanding to replace distance where division once stood. For the first time in a long while, their relationship moved beyond titles and hierarchy. They stood together as equals, united by purpose. Side by side, they worked on a statement of great significance, not as representatives of an institution, but as two individuals seeking to safeguard someone deeply cherished. Early discussions carried traces of strain, yet over time they settled into a shared resolve, with each phrase and every detail considered thoughtfully to preserve balance, truth, and intention. They practiced the statement in private not to achieve polished performance, but because they knew each phrase held consequence and would influence how people perceived the moment. The narrative surrounding Catherine was no longer shaped by careful limitation, but by transparency and consideration. Yet this shift did not go unnoticed within the royal circle. Figures who had long guided decisions felt a growing unease, aware that familiar boundaries were being tested and that influence was subtly realigning in directions beyond their former reach. They worried that altering course would establish a new standard, that greater openness would loosen the structure they had always relied on to maintain order. Above all, there was concern that the image shaped across generations might begin to fracture. Yet reality had reached a point where it could no longer be confined to private spaces. Matters became even more complex, as it emerged that Catherine had displayed signs of deep fatigue well before this chapter unfolded. Quiet, recurring indications often concealed beneath a relentless schedule, and the heavy expectations she consistently shouldered. Standard health evaluations had previously hinted that not everything was in perfect balance, yet within a culture that prized steadiness and outward calm, those signals were frequently set aside. Catherine carried on with her public role, offering the familiar warmth people had come to expect. She fulfilled appearances, connected with communities, and upheld the poise that defined her presence. Still, once each engagement ended, weariness became harder to conceal. There were moments when her diminishing energy required a brief stillness, a quiet pause to regain composure before moving forward once again. These instances passed quietly, shielded from wider view in an effort to honor personal boundaries. On more than one occasion, she experienced moments of near collapse during public visits, each one managed with care and discretion. Health professionals recommended further evaluation to better understand the underlying signs, and the more thorough findings prompted genuine concern. They emphasized the importance of immediate rest and timely support, yet within the royal household, hesitation driven by media sensitivity and fear of public reaction led to repeated delays, postponing critical choices again and again, even as the circumstances steadily became more pressing. As discussions continued behind the scenes, Catherine's state shifted more rapidly than anticipated. Outwardly, she remained poised and serene, yet beneath that composure she was enduring a persistent, unseen struggle. William recognized the change and pressed repeatedly for a different course of action, but the accumulated hesitation had already complicated matters beyond easy resolution. Carefully selected images and reassuring language were assembled to steady public sentiment, even as the truth behind those refined presentations was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. Behind the scenes, prolonged and emotionally charged discussions unfolded as the family wrestled with what responsibility truly demanded. Some felt openness was owed, while others worried that full disclosure might unravel already fragile stability. As the institution faced mounting strain, it was Catherine who ultimately took an unforeseen step. She decided to share her voice in a way that felt authentic to her, not through official statements or calculated messaging, but through a modest, sincere recording made in a peaceful garden, guided by calm intention rather than ceremony. In that short span of time, she spoke with quiet clarity about her experience. The message surfaced unexpectedly, not as a calculated release, but as a sincere and brave expression shared on her own terms. In doing so, the distance between the royal household and the public seemed to soften, revealing a side rooted in shared humanity rather than ceremony. That single moment reshaped how many came to understand openness, inner strength, and the lasting impact of speaking truth with grace. There were no formal melodies, no symbols of authority framing the message. It was simply her, seated in a calm outdoor space, surrounded by stillness. Her tone remained soft and composed, yet the weight carried by each sentence held the audience's full attention. She acknowledged what had remained unspoken for so long, that she had undergone a significant medical procedure and that the findings pointed to a serious condition requiring ongoing care. She avoided technical language and chose clarity instead, speaking in a direct, human way, as someone sharing her own path with honesty rather than formality. If her openness and quiet strength resonate with you, leave a 1. If you're still reflecting and unsure, leave a 0. Stay with us for the full story and remember to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel so we can continue sharing thoughtful, moving narratives that inspire understanding and connection. Her gaze, the silences between phrases, each deliberate breath conveyed a calm resolve that needed no emphasis. She expressed gratitude to those who had waited with patience and gently requested continued space as her care moved forward. Yet beneath the composed delivery lingered the subtle feeling of letting go of something once familiar, quiet, contained, and profoundly aching. There was no spectacle or flourish, only a hush that seemed to draw every viewer closer, as though she fully grasped the gravity of her reality, and still chose to release it softly, in words carried almost like a murmur. The response rose swiftly, sweeping across digital spaces with remarkable intensity. On platforms around the world, interest and engagement multiplied at such speed that timelines struggled to keep pace. Words of encouragement and symbols of support traveled across borders, linking strangers through shared concern. Broadcasters paused, voices softening as they repeated her message in real time. Near royal landmarks, candles glowed long into the night, small points of light carrying silent hopes. Messages arrived from students, from families, from figures of public responsibility, all converging toward a single expression of care and solidarity. Yet within that surge of collective feeling, one moment brought the nation to a standstill, the quiet reaction of Prince William, her husband. Accounts later suggested he had not known the precise moment the message would appear. Hours afterward, while visiting a school, a child voiced the question echoing across the country, "How is she doing, sir?" In that instant, William's posture softened. He lowered his gaze, his expression shifting as he turned slightly away, not swiftly enough to conceal eyes touched with emotion, revealing a depth of feeling no words could shield. For the first time in his public journey, the usually steady and self-contained figure allowed emotion to surface, without disguise or defense. Those nearby noticed, yet no images were amplified. No moment was turned into display. Even observers understood that this was not a scene meant for commentary, but a private fracture within a family. What she had done was unprecedented in spirit. The familiar layers of distance and formality were set aside, replaced by the quiet truth of a person confronting an immense personal trial. And rather than diminishing anything, that sincerity reshaped perception, revealing that openness, when guided by dignity, can carry a strength far deeper than any symbol ever could. It allowed the institution itself to feel closer, more grounded in shared experience. Her openness was not a sign of fragility. It emerged as a deeper kind of resilience, something long symbolized but rarely embodied. Centuries of distance and quiet mystique seemed to dissolve in little more than a minute, yet nothing was lost. What followed was a sense of relief, a family willing to acknowledge hardship, willing to face reality without disguise, not through ceremony or status, but through transparency, sincerity, and a calm, unwavering courage. Even as global sentiment gathered around her with care and confidence, a different tension quietly emerged within the historic corridors. An unspoken question took form: how responsibilities might shift if familiar roles could no longer be resumed as before. While people beyond the gates expressed hope and solidarity, subtle deliberations unfolded behind them. The residence, once defined by continuity and reflection, gradually took on another dimension, where influence and future positioning were considered in hushed tones. No one spoke the forbidden term aloud. Within royal circles, such language simply does not exist. Yet subtle signs began to appear. Meetings quietly deferred, responsibilities gently redistributed, long-established arrangements adjusting in ways once considered unthinkable. In private exchanges, a difficult question slowly surfaced, unvoiced yet present in every pause. What if her return was no longer certain? And within that space of uncertainty, influence began to drift, not with declarations or visible gestures, but through small, deliberate movements. The change was not announced, yet it was felt a quiet realignment moving through the palace halls, restrained, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Individuals within Camilla's closest advisory circle, figures well-versed in quiet navigation, were among the first to recognize a shift taking shape. Conversations began to surface about the potential for her presence to grow more visible again. These discussions were never framed as ambition, but as continuity. They spoke in careful terms about reinforcing steadiness, assuming select representational duties, guiding symbolic appearances, and being prepared to step forward should circumstances require reassurance rather than disruption. The phrasing was consistently careful, polished to sound responsible rather than self-serving, yet the underlying intent was quietly understood. Each suggestion was presented as obligation, never desire. Those nearest to Eleanor, the princess in recovery, recognized the shift at once. Anne, seasoned by years of service in this imagined royal sphere, saw through the framing without hesitation. Sophie did as well. Both had carried the weight of duty long enough to distinguish genuine necessity from calculated positioning, and their allegiance remained with integrity and clarity, not with subtle games of advantage. Whenever conversations edged toward the notion of finding someone else, they were halted without hesitation. During one closed-door discussion, Anne reportedly addressed a senior advisor with rare firmness, cautioning that even entertaining such language could fracture the fragile trust still holding public confidence together. Sophie added her voice as well, underscoring that Eleanor's absence was not a vacancy to be claimed, but a period of difficulty that required dignity, restraint, and unwavering respect. The family could endure quiet restraint for a time, but deception masked as procedure was something else entirely. Even so, subtle repositioning carried on behind closed doors. Calendars were re-examined in silence. Select responsibilities shifted hands. Appearances were recalibrated under the familiar language of preserving continuity. Every move was made carefully, quietly, and without William's knowledge, until the moment he became aware of it himself. And when that realization settled in, a fierce surge of emotion rose within him, sudden and impossible to contain.